Hi, and welcome back. After we prepared our microphone for post-processing, this is what we start with today. Setting up the maximizer, LoudMax. I know. I said I would start up with the EQ, but I figured it's much more practical to actually start with maximizing the signal, just so we can hear better what influence every setting has on the sound. So, LoudMax it is. Let's start with the elephant in the room on what LoudMax does to the signal. You can see that the signal, according to OBS, is deep in the red zone. This looks like a serious sign for alarm. But don't worry. As scary as that may look, it really is not a problem. The red zone is meant to warn us about but one thing. And that is being dangerously close to hit the 0 dBFS mark, because a signal surpassing it will cause clipping. But that is what LoudMax is going to prevent once we did set it the way I did here. This is not necessarily a fixed setting, so don't even try to simply copy what I'm using right now. Sounds complicated? It really isn't though. Just look at this plugin. The upper meter will never change its behavior, no matter what setting you choose. It is the input, showing how loud the signal gets going into the plugin. On the lower level meter, you see the signal going out of the plugin. This will change with the settings that you choose for the two slider controls. Before we are going to do that though, please note there is a third level meter on the right, but it behaves very differently from the other two. This meter shows how much the signal is being lowered in volume to prevent it from getting louder than any given setting for the output. Even more impressive though, you can control this plugin with just the two slider controls that you see here and here. Okay, and this button. The upper control raises the signal by up to 30 dBFS. Leaving it at 0 dB will give you no amplification. Setting it to minus 30 dB will give you 30 dB of amplification. If you give more amplification than needed to reach the maximum volume, the meter on the right will react more, indicating by how much the signal is being attenuated to prevent clipping. The lower control will do the exact opposite. The reason for this is simple. If you didn't have that control, the outgoing signal would always be as loud as it gets. And maybe you don't want that. Also, it could potentially cause clipping. This might seem to contradict the intended use of the plugin, but it is actually a limitation to keep the CPU load and the latency low. But there's an easy fix for this. Just set the lower control to minus 2 dB or lower and push the button saying ISP. ISP, by the way, stands for intersample peak. Sometimes it is also called true peak. You can find a similar setting for the level meter in OBS. This calculates the actual loudness you'd have on the analog side. The reason for this existing is, even if you have no samples going higher than 0 dBFS, sometimes the actual signal can be louder. So now that we know this plugin inside out, how do we use this? Simply speaking, you want to talk normally and set the upper control so the fader is around the same volume of your voice in average. The average is met if, speaking normally, you get reduction spikes on the right side about 4 decibels, 4 dB. If you speak some parts of a sentence louder, you can get higher numbers as well though. The amount of limiting applied is only controlled with the upper slider control. As for the lower slider control, if you set it to minus 4 dB, while having the average spike reduction kicking in at 4 decibels as well, you get, combined with another sound source already, roughly about minus 18 LUFS, which is luckily what, for example, YouTube expects. But more importantly, it will give you a very loud signal that never clips, enabling you to make your stream as loud as possible. And that is what you want. If it is too loud for someone, they can always turn down the volume. Being able to listen to your stream even in a rather loud environment is a bliss. In contrast, naturally, you can only turn up the volume by so much. And the best stream isn't worth much if your viewers cannot hear you. So in very short repeat, set your upper slider control to meet up with the signal on the input meter while you are talking normally. The meter on the right is supposed to be about 4 decibels for peaks, but will naturally go higher though if you talk louder. The lower slider control is to be set to -4 dB. Also, press the button on the plugin saying ISP. One last hint: if you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard while moving any slider control around, it will move slower, enabling you to get exactly the setting that you want. And this concludes this little tutorial on using LoudMax on stream. Next time, and this time for real, we are going to talk about the EQ. Until then, thanks for watching.